Chapter 9. Virulence. Today, the professor wants Megan to help him select candidates for their research project. She stands outside his office, debating with herself. She knows who's not going to be on the team. The hard part is choosing who will. They'd all have to be biology majors like her, so that narrows it down to a few dozen. Out of those she knows personally, a fraction of about 1/10 if she's being generous, she would trust maybe 1/4 with sensitive information like this. That's 5 or 6 people. Larry's boss said that she'd run background checks on all of them, so the list might as well be long. Bump that list of 5 or 6 up to 10 or 11 candidates, no more than 13. She knocks on the door. The professor greets her and leads her inside. "So," he says after a moment, "the chief wants us to send her a list of potential candidates." Meg nods. "I have some suggestions." "Let's hear it." She lists off the students she had in mind. Once she's finished, the professor smiles and hands her a piece of paper on which he's written a list of his own. "Great minds think alike," he says. She looks at the paper. At the top of the list, he's written her own name, followed by many of the students she listed, as well as a few others she doesn't recognize. She smiles and hands the list back to him. "Do you want me to fax that for you?" "I'll deliver it myself," he says, tucking the paper away in the drawer. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you." "Oh?" "Do you live near campus, Miss Palladino?" "An apartment on the hill, why do you ask?" "Before long," he explains, "certain people are going to get wind of all this. It's inevitable that someone should come snooping around sooner or later." She nods slowly. "And?" "And we're going to want to keep backups of everything. Our data, tissue samples, the whole lot." Megan doesn't like where this is going. "So you want me to start making copies?" "We need a safe place to keep everything. I can keep some things under my care, but I'd be a lot more comfortable with a bit of redundancy, especially with the tissue samples." "You want me to keep highly dangerous biological material in my apartment?" "Under normal circumstances, I would never ask something like this of anyone, let alone one of my students." "But these aren't normal circumstances." "Correct." She thinks for a moment, but a moment is all it takes. The prospect of stem cell research alone is enough to assuage any fears of contamination. She nods. "Okay, but I don't have any kind of storage equipment." "I'm sure we can arrange something. I wouldn't want you to store sea carpentary next to the ice cream." She nods again. "Right." He smiles warmly. "I'm glad to have you as a research partner, Megan." The professor's phone rings and he answers it. Megan stands and shares a wordless exchange with him, excusing herself. She's just about to walk out the door when he stops her. "Hang on a moment." He hangs up the phone. "That was Mr. Barrett. Apparently, we've got ourselves another sample." The professor sends Megan alone to go pick up their new sample. Sure, she'll have to skip calculus, but what's one more missed class? If this research project is a success, she could be a Nobel Prize winner. If they fail, the world might end. Either way, she'd never have to worry about grades or credits ever again. Besides, she likes seeing Ben. He's a good guy. And if it wasn't for him, they might have never even discovered the Corporal Multa. She walks into the lobby of the shelter, asks the woman behind the counter for Ben, and is directed to an office down the hall. The door is open, and Ben is sitting at his desk. He should have been expecting her, but he seems surprised. "Oh, hey," he says, standing up. He bumps his desk with his hip, sloshing coffee on some papers. "Shit," he whispers, trying to clean up the mess with a handful of tissues. Megan laughs and approaches the desk. "Here, let me help." "It's all right, I got it." She steps back while Ben pats up the liquid and throws the soiled tissues into a bin by the desk. He carries the soaked papers over to the wall and sets them next to a vent by the floor, weighing them down with a stapler. "Okay." He stands up. "Let me show you the animal." She follows him out of the office and down the hall to a mop closet, wherein sits the raccoon. "You left him in the trap?" "It's a female," he clarifies. "I didn't want to risk the infection spreading." He thinks for a moment. "You're gonna put her down, right?" Megan hadn't thought about this. She had presumed not. "I don't think so," she says. "I mean, you're better equipped for that here, aren't you?" Ben stares down at the helpless creature. "I really don't know which is best," he says. "She doesn't act like she's suffering, but she must be, right?" Megan doesn't respond. I figured I'd leave it up to the professor, he says, picking up the cage and handing it to her. I'm sure he'll know what to do. You should probably leave out the back door. Of course. Hang on, says Ben. He walks out of the mop closet and down the hall, returning a moment later with a white cloth to drape over the cage. Good call. He thanks her and shows her the way to the back door. When she gets back to the school, most of the students have already left. She likes this time of day. It's quiet and there's a lot less foot traffic. Perfect for getting some work done. She heads into the science building and up the stairs to the biology lab where the professor is waiting for her. She sets the trap on one of the counters in the middle of the room and pulls off the sheet. The professor walks over and bends down to inspect the animal's face. It's different, he says after a moment. I don't think it's sea carpentary. What else could it be? A teratoma by the looks of it. Megan bends down for a better look. He's right. Instead of a mass of fleshy crimson tendrils like previous carpentary specimens, this one looks more like a mess of hairy, bony lumps. Just a normal tumor. Her heart sinks. A wild animal infected naturally by the organism would have been the perfect addition to their collection. A raccoon with a tumor would be practically useless. She sighs. We could still expose it to carpentary, see how the infection reacts to the neoplasm. Perhaps. The professor walks over to the counter against the wall, selects a scalpel and a pair of latex gloves from a drawer and returns to the cage. What are you doing? Checking the tissue underneath. He puts on the gloves and slowly opens the cage. Shouldn't we anesthetize the area first? The professor doesn't respond. He carefully reaches into the trap and grabs the docile creature by the neck, gently dragging it toward him. He picks up a scalpel with his free hand and presses against the tumor. The raccoon squirms, kicking its feet listlessly against the bars as dark blood begins to ooze from the cut. A fetid stench erupts from the wound, making Megan hold her nose. He makes another incision beside the first one, removing a wedge-shaped piece of tissue. Megan goes to the first aid kit on the wall and retrieves some gauze and disinfectant. When she returns to the counter, the professor is smiling. She follows his gaze to the wound on the raccoon's face. Small, purplish tendrils are sprouting out from the incision site, wriggling and feeling the surrounding flesh with their tips. A few of them twist around each other, forming a sort of mesh over the wound. A small amount of blood trickles out through the flesh and bandage, but quickly coagulates. That's not like any teratoma I've ever seen, says Megan. No, it's not.